Hello, hello! Today I noticed a new ship had popped up in the premium store on the EU server. It's the Krasny Krym. I have no idea how to pronounce that, so I'm not even gonna attempt to. Krasny Krym is the name of it anyway. It's a Soviet T5 premium cruiser. Not exactly something that we needed, another T5 Soviet premium cruiser, since we already have the Murmansk, which is obviously fantastic. So naturally a lot of the comparisons I'm going to make are going to be to the Murmansk, since that's obviously going to be the direct competitor to this ship. They're even priced the same. Both are 3,000 doubloons, or around a bit less than 13 euros, so they're both fairly cheap. But whereas the Murmansk is a fantastic ship for the price, the Krasny Krym is anything but. A thoroughly disappointing ship is what I might say. It's basically, if you took a Svetlana and then you took the hull of a Murmansk and you slapped the guns from the Svetlana on the Murmansk. That's basically how it feels. It's got these 130mm pea shooters that do very little damage, have pitiful AP penetration, and they only have an 8% fire chance. The good part is, this is their 130mm, you can use AFT on them, which is why I buffed the default 13 point something range to 16.2. So that range is nice, and shell arc and shell speed is decent-ish. I mean, you're not going to be sniping anyone who actually actively avoids them well, but I mean, you can spam a bunch of HE at a lot of targets. And the issue is, that HE doesn't really do much. I selected this game because I'm matched up against T4, T5, T6 ships, which is pretty much the average you're gonna end up against. The ship does noticeably better against T4s, just like the Svetlana does, but it's absolutely blows against T7s. Like, it's not even funny how you can't pen any cruiser from any angle, and they can pen you so easily. You're even less armored than the Murmansk. You have less citadel armor in some parts than the Murmansk, so you're not going to be tanking any shells from pretty much anyone. The base damage, as you saw, is 1.9k on the HE shells, but they're 130mm shells, so that number kind of lies, since armor tends to mitigate a lot of it. Okay, I'm going to slow down a bit. I want this guy to pass. I want to see if I can perhaps pen this Kuma with my AP. The Kuma is a T4 ship. The Svetlana can pen the Kuma from close range, so I'm hoping I'll be able to do the same, or well, if he gives a lot of broadside, it can pen it. Of course, the torpedoes on the ship are quite good, or well, they're not really good. They got good firing angles, but the actual damage is less than the Murmansk torps, and the range is only 3.7k, so you can only really use them if you're YOLOing someone, which you kind of don't want to do, because this ship isn't very good at YOLOing people, because it's got paper armor, and of course it's got a lot of range to use, so YOLOing kind of goes against that. Showed broadside, okay, I was able to at least citadel that, but the citadels don't exactly do a lot of damage, and that was a Kuma, a notoriously thinly armored T4 cruiser, so not exactly impressive to be able to citadel him. Okay, that Fus is aiming for me. That's pretty obvious. I'm gonna try to angle myself, but I already know that you can't really angle against any battleships in this thing, because thinly armored, even more thinly armored than a Murmansk ship. I'm gonna see if I can juke him. Okay, let's see if I can turn into those now. But the rudder shift, of course, that's another issue. I'm not gonna turn in time. That's half my HP gone. You might notice the HP pool is, I think, the second lowest of all T5 ships. Even the Murmansk has like 1.7k more HP, and of course, for some reason, the rudder shift is also even worse than the Murmansk, significantly so. I think it's got almost twice the rudder shift of the Murmansk, which was why, by habit there, I tried to basically turn in time into the shells, but the rudder shift is so lazy that I didn't have time to turn into them, but instead I was caught like halfway into the turn, which wasn't really good angling at all. The speed is, for a cruiser, very pitiful. It's 29 knots. That's for Atlanta is known as a fairly slow cruiser, and the Atlanta does 32.5 knots. So the fact that this one can only do 29. You saw the torpedo angles there; they are very nice, but Honestly, that's pretty much the only thing I found that is very nice on this ship, the torpedo angles. The speed, 29 knots, is of course a huge negative, since pretty much every single cruiser in the game can outrun you, and every single cruiser in the game can hunt you down. Hell, some battleships can even hunt you down, which is like the Congo is faster than you are, which is pretty pitiful. So, not fast, not very maneuverable, not well armored, not much gunpowder. What does it actually have? Well, the AA is slightly better than the Murmansk AA, but considering you don't have access to defensive AA, ultimately that AA actually means very little. So, what else could I possibly mention about this? Well, the good part is, of course, because it uses AFT, you can use your Russian gunboat captains on it, because you benefit from both AFT and BFT. But yeah, it's got hydro, but then again, most T4 cruisers already have hydro, and I think pretty much all T5s have hydro, so not really much to brag about. It's an overall extremely underwhelming cruiser. So the only reason I can think of to buy this ship would be for the sentimental value, or this is basically like a Campbelltown, but even worse. I thought the Campbelltown was underwhelming, but this one is honestly just quite garbage. I have a hard time finding it's a Svetlana in much worse matchmaking, and ending up against T7 matchmaking in this thing, I mean, it truly is nightmarish. It's worse than ending up with an Atlanta against T9 ships. It's far worse than that. With Atlanta you can at least do something, but this thing it's pitiful how completely steamrolled it gets. The only time you can do things is basically when they're distracted and you get to open up, because it does have a lot of guns, which is of course nice, but the problem is the only time you can use the AP is from very, very close range against perfect broadsides, which makes it extremely situational, and the HE does so little damage and has such a low fire chance that it's also very situational. There are times when I've been able to do a huge chunk of damage to DDs, because, well, a lot of small they don't really care about. They have no armor against the low caliber guns, so low caliber guns do a lot of damage to DDs. So against DDs, the ship is quite potent, but then again, so is pretty much every cruiser. I mean, I can't think of a T5 cruiser who got to jump on a DD and who wouldn't be extremely potent. It might be more potent than some of the very lazy long reload ones like Kirov, but that's pretty much it. And having on your resume being a cruiser that is especially good at killing DDs isn't exactly impressive, because there isn't a single cruiser that struggles to kill DDs per se. The game ended, honestly, very short game. There is not much to talk about. I'm just gonna go over to modules and captain perks straight away. Ultimately, it becomes extremely hard to justify buying this, especially if you own the Murmansk. Like, just looking at the stats on the Murmansk, you gotta consider I have a captain on this guy now. So the Murmansk is better concealment. And just look at the maneuverability, 34 knots, 3.8 second rudder shift, 590. Then we go to the Krasny, 5 knots less speed, worse rudder shift. The AA, it's the only thing where the Krasny seems to beat the Murmansk. Torpedoes are worse. Torpedo angles are great, but still, these are pretty much the same ones. Actually worse than the one the Murmansk get, and these are 8 kilometer ones. And the armor is better on it, the hit points are better. Of course, the guns are far superior on the Murmansk compared to these little pea shooters. It's just, this is a ship I absolutely cannot in any way recommend, unless you really want to Krasny Krym. But like, if you have a Murmansk, there's absolutely no reason ever to get this ship. And if you are going to get it though, I recommend using your Russian DD captain on it, meaning you take the captain which you have advanced firing training and basic firing training on, since both these combined will buff the otherwise mediocre range to 16.2. I think the normal range was 13 point something, 13.6 or whatever. So with AFT, it's I mean, it's still not a good ship. The HE is weak, the fire chance is only 8%, the AP is weak, you just need to hit those perfect broadsides to get any sort of pins out of it. Honestly, just avoid this ship. That's my recommendation.